Hello and welcome. You're listening to Sparking Spiritual Growth. I'm Jason Sparks, and for all of you here on Kingdom Purpose Radio, thanks for tuning in. We're going to look at foundations for a great marriage. I know we all, if we're married, we want to have a good marriage. Nobody wants to see it end. And it's good for us to see how to lay a foundation that will help make sure that we have the best marriage possible. Now, obviously, there's nothing that we can say that's going to prevent all problems. But with this foundation that's laid down, we are better able to manage the difficulties, and at least we'll have some guidelines to know how to function, what's the best way to do it. So we're going to look at three ideas that are basic to the scriptures about how it is that we can have a happy marriage. And hopefully then that will be able to be used as a springboard to improve marriage. Sometimes we get stuck in a rut, so to speak, or we kind of get settled. We have our roles and we kind of settle into them, and it's almost like we just kind of do our thing and eventually figure out how we can interact so that we have the least amount of conflict. That's generally what happens. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we need to try to find ways to get along. But we all know that in any given relationship, it can be improved. And in order for that improvement to come, we have to learn new things. We need to improve our skills. And so this is part of what we're trying to do, that I'm trying to help lay the groundwork for you to hopefully improve and have even more joy from your marriage. And of course, also as Christians, this is something that's a very important idea. Marriage is second to our relationship with God. We understand it's a high priority. We want to talk about one of those things, and one of the aspects of it is the fact that this is a high priority. We're also going to look at the fact that we need to understand who God is and what God wants for a marriage, and so that we can fulfill those roles as God intended them. Now, the thing about roles is these are not arbitrary. These things are established from God, and He had good reason. It's not that He simply did it because they were, like I said, they're not arbitrary decisions on His part. He has good reason for the things that He does. That's the way it is with everything that He does. And so we need to understand what He wants and actually understand that what He wants is always what is best for us, and we can learn to accept that or not. And I realize that in these, we're going to talk about these as general principles, so we have to still have to figure out, how it is that these are going to work. What are we going to do to apply these to our lives, to our marriages? But at least we'll have some guidelines, and most of this stuff we already all know. But it is good for us to be reminded from time to time what exactly God wants. So let's get into it now. The first one is talking about respecting God's design and God's authority. And it should be, it shouldn't even need to be stated that we need to respect God's authority, but there are people today who seem to be thwarting that or trying to supersede it or trying to step around it and pretend like He hasn't actually spoken on these certain things. A lot of people, it seems like, are trying to do their own thing and then get upset and blame marriage itself when things don't work out very well. But we need to understand that God is the one who instituted marriage. And we can see that all the way back in the book of Genesis. In fact, Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 24, this is where God first talked about marriage. It says, "The Lord God said, 'It is not good that man should be alone.'" This is right after He created Adam. "It's not good that man will be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. And the Lord God caused a great sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now that's the idea of where marriage began. God created Eve because he recognized that Adam was alone. Now he also put Adam through some paces here. This is still on the sixth day. He put Adam in a situation where he would recognize that he had a need, and that's a very important idea. It's how God presented this woman to him. So he looked around and he saw that all the animals had a mate. They all had a second, right? And he did that. He noticed that because while he was naming them, but he also noticed that there wasn't anyone for him like there was for these other animals that are on the earth. And so God caused a deep sleep, took from his rib, which is very symbolic, and it shows that it wasn't, as Jewish rabbis used to say, that he wasn't taken from a bone in his head so that she should rule over him. She wasn't taken from a bone in his feet that he should walk all over her. She was taken from a rib from his side so that he would be there to protect her and be close to his heart. And I think it's symbolism that's very fitting. And so whenever he created her from this rib, he then brought her to him, presented her as if here is a gift. And what God had done is set it up so that when he did present Eve to Adam, he would understand, oh, this is someone that I need. This is someone that's important to me. And so it's very interesting how that was laid out. He didn't do that for the animals. He did that for humans. And probably because we have to have some kind of a way of introducing concepts to us before we can really accept them. But anyway, this is what God intended from the very beginning. Now, thousands of years later, when Jesus was on the earth, he also talked about marriage because people asked him, and this has been something, marriage today is a little controversial in some ways. There are a lot of people questioning it. There's all kinds of people that are abusing the concept, even trying to get rid of the idea. That's nothing new. We pretend, our society kind of tends to think that we have all these great new ideas, and there's nothing new under the sun. Marriage has been abused and mocked and had problems from the very beginning. We can see that even in the book of Genesis, we can see problem after problem, especially because it wasn't just a few generations after Adam that the first polygamist came on the scene that we could find. And he was also a murderer. So there have been abuses all throughout history. It's no different when Jesus was on the earth. There were people who were religious leaders who loved to just create ways to get around God's word. In Matthew chapter 19, it says in verse 3, the Pharisees also came to him, testing him and saying to him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? Now, there were two schools of thought, probably more than that, but one school of thought says, no, you can never do that. And the second school of thought says, well, it doesn't matter why you divorce your wife as long as you have a reason. Just be nice to her and give her a certificate of divorce if you don't want her in your house. So they were very loose, and some people were very, very strict with it. And so they're asking him, they're actually testing him to find out, okay, which one is it going to be? And it seemed like no matter where he answered, he's going to be in trouble with one of the groups. So he answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? And he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the very beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. And whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. Now we need to understand the response that Jesus was getting here. Because they asked him, why then did Moses command that we give certificates of divorce? And Jesus' response was, this was something done because of the hardness of your hearts. Now, what they're talking about is a passage in Deuteronomy chapter 24, where it says, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, then when she has departed from his house and goes and becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand and sends her out of this house, or if the latter husband dies, who took her as his wife, then her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled. For this is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. So what happened here is that Moses is regulating what was going on. He didn't command that people must divorce. If you don't like your wife, you must divorce. That's not the point at all. But he did command, if you do divorce her, then this is how you're going to treat her. You're going to give her a certificate of divorce. That's going to free her up. Then also, if you give her the certificate of divorce and you force her out of your house and she marries someone else and that man doesn't want her or that man dies, you can't just go take her back. This is not a piece of property to be passed around. That's the point that Moses is making here. And so he's regulating an abuse that had already was so prominent and that it had to be dealt with in some way. So just because God outlined exactly what he wanted in marriage does not mean that everyone did it. And so if everyone didn't do it, that means that there is some fallout. There's some things that still need to be regulated from the problems that come because of divorce. And we know there are a lot of problems that come because of divorce. So Moses is doing that, and Jesus is saying to them, this was done because of the hardness of your hearts. And so we can't use that as an excuse to say, well, we can just divorce for any reason, although that's what they were doing. So that's part of the test when they were testing him. But Jesus responded very well, and he told them, this is not the way it was from the very beginning. We should follow what God intended to be, for marriage to be, from the very beginning. And because of this, notice what he says in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 9. He says, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. And whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. So what he's saying here is that if you divorce, and the exception here that is given is fornication or sexual immorality, as this translation says, fornication. That's sexual activity outside of the marriage bonds. So if that is going on, that's an exception. But he says, for the general rule, whoever divorces and marries someone else is committing adultery. Now, adultery is a sin against marriage. He's not committing adultery to the person he's marrying. He's committing adultery to the person he divorced. So it shows that God doesn't actually recognize the fact that he has divorced from her. He has not allowed him to leave her, even though he has legally, put legally in quotes, according to the justice system, according to the laws of the land, he may have divorced her, but that does not mean that God recognizes that. That's how serious this bond is. So from these verses, from Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 24, and Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 9, we can see several points here that need to be stressed about what marriage is. First of all, it's monogamy. It is one man and one woman. Now, it has been abused. It's still being abused in many places around the world, but it's been all throughout history it's been abused. But the abuse of something is not the rule. And we need to recognize that. The rule is one man and one woman. And incidentally, it is one man and one woman. There's not two women being married. There's not two men being married. It's only a man and a woman. And we also recognize from this that this marriage is a bond that's for life. That we're not allowed to divorce our mates. We are allowed to be together until one of us dies. Now, when one dies, the other is free to remarry, free to go about life as if looking for another husband or another wife. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But as long as they're alive, we're bound to them. We are, that's what the marriage covenant is. In fact, it's so serious that divorce and remarriage, except for fornication, is adultery against that first spouse. But we also need to recognize that even marriage is inferior to our relationship with God. Jesus in Luke chapter 14 and verse 26 says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Now, what he's talking about there is not literally the word hate. It's a contrast word. That is, the love that we have for Jesus must far supersede the love that we have even for our own spouses. And that's something that has gotten people into trouble, because I've seen people who have turned away from God or never came to God because they were afraid it would offend their spouse or their children. And that's really his point here. If you're going to allow your father or your mother or your children or even your own wife or husband to keep you from God, he says, you cannot be my disciple, because God must come first and Jesus must come first in our lives. But that's the only exception to that. This is how important it is. Now, in doing that, we need to recognize not only should we respect the institution of marriage, we also should respect the role of the husband and the role of the wife. So here are the things. We can take this from Ephesians chapter 5 and several other passages that are in the Bible, but we need to recognize that for the role of the husband and respect that role. And it's not something that today is very popular to think about, but leadership is very important in the home, and God intended for the husband to lead the family. It's always been that way, and it was that way from the very beginning. That's part of what was going on in Genesis chapter 2, when we have the man who was created first, and then Eve was created for him. Now, there is mutual love and respect, of course, but it was done that way intentionally. Well, if Ephesians chapter 5 tells the husband that he should love his wife just as much as Jesus loves the church. In fact, he gave himself for the church. He died for the church. That's how much we should love our wives. We were never commanded to rule over our wives. And in fact, this whole idea of submission that comes up between the husband and wife, you need to understand that that's always a commandment that's given to the wives. It's not something that's given to the husband to rule over. It's told to the wives to submit to. There's a big difference between that, between those ideas. We are never commanded, men, to rule over our wives. We are commanded to love our wives and to set the pace, to help lead, of course, but to love them, to sacrifice ourselves for her safety, for her well-being. In fact, Peter says that we are to honor our wives and cherish them, really, not be embittered against them. We also provide due affection, and there are a lot of things that can fit under that idea of due affection. It can be physical affection, it can be emotional affection. These things are our responsibility. We must provide affection to our spouse, to our wives, husbands. And it's a shame that sometimes women will go for years and years without having the affection that's due her. But it happens, and we need to be very careful and cautious about that. It's very important in a relationship that affection be shown. And we also need to understand the role of the wife and respect that from the Scriptures too. Now, Ephesians chapter 5 and Titus chapter 2, several other passages tell us these ideas. First of all, you follow his lead. Ephesians chapter 5 says, submit to your husbands. That means that you're willing to, with humility, to allow him to take the lead. Now, it doesn't mean that you be a doormat. It means that you follow his lead. So if he wants to do something, this is what we're going to do. And this is a coordinated effort. You have to let him lead. You have to encourage that leadership. And that's part of the idea of being submissive to your husband. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 2 says that you provide due affection to your husband. And of course, that related to what the husband shows to the wife as well. And in fact, we are not our own. We belong to each other, and so we should be doing for the other what they need. And so this is part of that due affection, physical affection, emotional affection, all these things. And, I want to say also that a lot of times when we talk about this, wives are told to give sexual gratification to their husband as if that's the only thing that's needed. Now, I recognize that that's a big part of marriage for both sides. But Titus chapter 2 and verse 4 is an interesting verse because in that it's telling the older women to train the younger women. And one of the things they're supposed to train them to do was to be husband loving. And that's really about friendship. And so we need to have a close bond together, and husbands and wives should be friends together. It also says in Ephesians chapter 5 to show him respect. Now, I think that's an important idea. Some men crave respect even more than love. And what I mean by respect is to treat him with dignity. I've seen a lot of marriages where the wife treats the husband like he is 6 years old. Now, I realize he may act like he's 6 years old, or he may act like he's 12, but don't treat him as if he's a child. Treat him actually as if he were adult. Now, some of this is because of the differences in men and women in the way that men tend to behave versus how women tend to behave, how men tend to see the world versus how women tend to see the world. I realize that, and sometimes there's a maturity level that should be there that's not, and our culture really promotes the idea in many ways of men never really growing up. And husbands, you need to grow up. You need to be mature. You can't lead if you're not mature, and this is part of the reason I believe that God tells the women to submit to their husbands, because this is going to force, hopefully, it's going to force the men to mature in the relationship and mature as humans and learn how to lead and learn how to love. But you can't treat him like he's 6 and expect him to act like he's 35 or whatever. It also says in Titus chapter 2 that women should be keepers of the home. Now, that doesn't mean house slave. It means someone who's dedicated to making our home useful and open and a sanctuary, a place that's good for them to be. And this is something that's addressed specifically to women, but of course men have a part in this, yes. But it is specifically mentioned, and it's really been that way from the very creation of time. So we have to respect that. And in today's society, there tends to be, especially with mothers, especially working mothers, I realize, and even non-working mothers, or I shouldn't say non-working, I mean stay-at-home moms, these are, that there seems to be some division between the stay-at-home mom and the worker, and they kind of look down on each other, and there's really no room for that. We all are going to try to make it the best that we can. And that might mean that you're working. It might mean that you're not working, you're staying home. And it's really a matter of priority and a matter of, sometimes a matter of faith. Sometimes it's simply a matter of logistics. Things have to be paid. We have to do certain things. And we do things that we would really rather not do sometimes. But let's be gracious to each other and not judgmental. The principle here is that women be keepers of the home. And however that works out for you in your relationship, that should be a priority. That should be something that you don't simply dismiss and say, well, I'm not going to be that at all. Obviously, that's not right. But we have to figure out what is that makes it the best. And there's a whole lot of things that could be said here. There are a lot of things that could be said that I'm not qualified to say. And so this is one of the reasons Titus chapter 2 tells the older women to teach the younger women. I would definitely encourage you to seek out advice and just see what others have to say about that. But those are the ideas, the 3 ideas for how to have more respect for God's authority and God's design, because He is the one that created all these. And we can argue all that we want, that we don't want this or we don't agree with this or that, but you don't take it up with me. Take it up with God. Go to Him and say, why did you do this? And then, of course, it doesn't really matter why, because He's God, and He said to do it this way. And if we love God, we'll keep His commandments and do those things. But we start with respect. And if we don't have any respect for what God wants us to do, then how are we going to live our roles? You know, we can live however we want to live, certainly. And you can make your marriage work by completely reversing the roles. I have no doubt that happens. But in the end, what God said is what he expects. So do we trust God or not? Do we trust that he knows what he's talking about? Do we trust that he knows what is best for all people in this situation? I believe he does. And if you do too, then of course we're going to find ways to make that work. I want to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. You can see articles and other things at my website, sparkingspiritualgrowth.org. I know that there's some good information there. If you'd like some more information, if you'd like to have a discussion, if there's something that I missed, something that you'd like to add to, something we want to have a discussion about, even if you need a phone call, you can contact me through email, jason@sparksmore.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you and help you in any way that I can. Marriage is a difficult thing sometimes, but we can help each other. And so if you would love to have a discussion, I would love to have a discussion with you too. So just let me know. Jason@sparksmore.com. The second part of the foundation for a great marriage is authenticity. Authenticity is living out our roles. It includes a lot of different things we're going to talk about. But I want to say just for a minute what it's not. When I talk about authenticity, a lot of times that word has been used and abused, and I even hesitated to use the word, but it is a very fitting word. Authenticity does not mean that we are just ourselves and it doesn't matter how we behave if we're just being honest with who we are. I've known people who have used that as an excuse. They go around being rude to everyone. They do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And they seem to have no respect for anyone. They don't really care. And their excuse for being that way is, that's just who I am. If you don't like me, then, don't hang around me. That's not the idea that I'm talking about when I talk about authenticity. To me, authenticity is looking at what God wants me to be and living it out as best that I can. I'm trying my best to fulfill my duties and my roles in life. And that means I'm living from the inside out. Integrity is a good way of looking at that. We live from the inside out. When it comes down to it, only you and God know if you're actually living up to your potential. You're actually living your role the best that you can. We can have some input and we can give advice, and your spouse will have a good idea of whether or not you are doing exactly what you should be doing. But really, when it comes down to it, we have to decide for ourselves. Am I really doing all that I can? The reason for this is because the roles are very broad. Leadership is a very broad term. Submission is a very broad term. The things that God wants us to do, the principles, they're very broad, and they allow for us to have a lot of differences in personality and things like this. And so we recognize that, for example, in leadership, we recognize that a lot of people do things in a lot of different ways, but we can't look at them and say, well, one is better than the other. The only thing we can do is look at ourselves and say, okay, knowing myself, knowing what I believe to be best, what I believe to be true, what is actually part of my personality, am I actually doing the best that I can in leading my wife? And that's a question only we can ask, but it's something that we should ask. How are you doing? Men, are you actually leading your wives? I'm not talking about domineering, and I'm also not talking about sitting back and let her making all the decisions. There has to be a balance in there somewhere, right? You've got to be proactive or you can't lead. You have to be doing something, right? What is the emotional state of your family? Is your wife getting the nurturing that she needs? Do you have friendships? Do you have a plan for how you're going to interact with each other socially? Do you have a financial plan for your future? There are a lot of areas in which we need to learn how to lead. And being a leader, of course, is not being in control of everything, but you do have a responsibility to make sure things are going well, to help make sure that your family is taken care of. And so you need to provide a service. The service that we're going to be providing for our wives is hopefully we are going to be looking at all the different areas of our lives and offering input, offering help, being of service to our wife and be a service to our children. and doing everything that we can to make sure that we are all growing and developing as we should. And that means taking care of physically, taking care of financially, taking care of spiritually, and that really is the most important part. So if you fail in all the other areas, the one place you don't want to fail is in the spiritual part of taking care of your family. I've seen a lot of husbands who do a really good job, of fathers who do a really good job making sure their children have all the sports opportunities. They do very well, and they teach them how to do these things. And they're very supportive, and they go to a lot of things, and yet they don't teach their children the importance of having priority to putting God first. And that's a mistake. It's one that's easily remedied, but it is a mistake. And we have to ask ourselves, how are we doing? What is it that I do, or what do my actions and words say is most important in my life? Because your wife and your children will notice. Now, your wife, hopefully, even if you don't have a good relationship with God, she will. And that's certainly something that she can have without you, but it's so much better with you. There's a statistic that, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but people have studied this, have said that a large percentage of the people of the time of families, if the husband is converted to Christianity, the entire family will come around. It's a huge percentage, and it shows the importance of the fathers in the home. It shows the importance of the husband in the home. You are important in that family, and you need to assert yourself and live the way that God wants you to live. Now, obviously, we treat each other with respect, never saying to abuse, but you need to step up and show leadership. And I realize that that's really not something that today is even politically correct. It may even be offensive to some people. Well, I can't apologize for the way God has arranged things and how He has done from eternity, from very beginning of creation. This is the way it's always been, and this is what God expects of you. So whether or not we accept it, it's still there. And part of leadership then is, of course, growing to accept the fact that we have some responsibility. And if we will start taking advantage of the responsibilities that we have, we start fulfilling the roles that we have, we're going to go a long ways in doing exactly what God wants us to do. That's for men or women. It's a very important idea. And wives, are you actually going the pace of your husband? Are you pulling him along? And one of the most frustrating things that I can imagine for wives is having a husband that you're looking at to lead who is not doing anything and not leading at all. And there are a lot of reasons that could be going on. And one of them could be that he's used to you taking the lead. It could also be that he's used to his mother taking the lead. There are a lot of reasons that could be in there, and those are just two of many. But I know for a fact that it's very difficult to go the pace of your leader if you think your leader is not going anywhere or is going too slow. But how do you submit to your husband if you don't follow his pace? So I know that there are struggles here. I know that this can be very difficult because how do you follow your husband if he's not going anywhere? I get that. How can you follow your husband if he's not following the Lord? Well, you can't. You can't follow your husband away from the Lord. You have to live your life for the Lord. He comes first, and then find a way to make that balance. And so you're trying to listen to your husband and go where he wants to go and be the person that he wants you to be. But at the same time, you have someone who's far more important in your life than your husband, or you should have someone far more important. That's God himself. So this is what I'm talking about. We have to live with integrity. We also need to recognize that as far as authenticity goes, it's also an idea of improvement. When we are living from the inside out, we're always growing. We need to always recognize that we can improve. So how do you improve, though? What is it that you can do to improve? You know, the best way is to start getting more information and using it. So you can go to classes, seminars, you can seek advice, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can read articles. There's so much information out there that anybody who wants to grow, they can grow. They can learn how to do it. But the point is that we must make the decision that we're going to learn, we're going to grow. That's part of the integrity thing, but it's living from the inside out. And if I'm not growing in my relationship with my wife, then how can I claim that I'm actually growing as a human at all? This should be one of the most important relationships in my entire world, the second most important relationship. So are you doing this? Are you growing in your love for your spouse? There are a few things that are required for love. I know at least 3. The first one is time together. The second one is knowledge about each other. And the third one is communication with each other. Without those 3, you don't have love. So do you actually make time to be with your spouse? Do you schedule time if you're very busy? Do you put it on a calendar? Is it important enough for you to spend time? And I don't mean spend time right before you go to bed, right? I mean spend time, a quality amount of time with your loved one, doing things together, spending time together, getting to know each other even better. Another idea with this of living from the inside out is that we need to shine. Let your personal light shine. Jesus said to let your light so shine that people will see your deeds and give thanks to the Father in heaven. Well, part of that is in our relationship, we help our spouse shine. I can help my wife shine her light. My wife can help me shine my light. And we do that through encouragement, through communication, and also we shine the light of having a happy marriage. If you have a happy marriage, it's okay to let people know it. Now, we don't want to go around bragging about that. Of course, that would be really bad and show a lot of pride. But we should let people see what a good marriage is about. And there's so many people that are hurting and marriages that seem to be falling apart. And I know the marriage statistics have been really bad for a long time. And some people say it's not quite 50, it's in the 40s for the divorce rate. I don't know what the divorce rate is now. I know that there are a lot of people that are hurting, though. And for 40% of the country to be getting a divorce, that means there are a lot of other couples that haven't really gone into that process or even thinking about that. Or maybe they're in a place where they believe it's wrong for them to divorce, so they're not going to get a divorce at all. There are a lot of marriages that are sad. And a requirement for marriage is not about longevity. It's about longevity doing it God's way, getting along, learning from one another. And that takes time and knowledge and communication. So shine. Let that light shine if you have a good marriage. People need to see it. They need to be encouraged and tell people what you think is going well in their marriage. I know that they would love that kind of input. Well, how do you know if you're a good husband or wife? Well, here's some ideas. Assess yourself. Read passages about your role. Ephesians chapter 5 is a great place to start because it talks about husband and wife both. And ask this question. Think of something you want to improve and say, what is preventing me from being more blank? What's preventing you from being more? Come up with the answer and find a way around it. And ask your spouse. That, again, communication. That may take some courage, but ask, what can I do to improve? Pray about the situation. Ask God to help you. Ask yourself how well you know your spouse. And get to know him or her. And you'll be absolutely blessed because of that. I want to be part of a blessing for you and your family today, if you'll let me. I would love to pray for you, especially if you're having difficulties, that God will give you a good, strong marriage. So if you would like that, please let me know. There's no obligations here. If you just send me an email message, jason@sparksmore.com, I'll sit and pray for you, and it's not that my prayers are any better than anyone else's, but I think if we're working together and we're praying together, the more people that pray for a situation, the more likely it is that we can see good resolution. And if you have any other questions or comments, please let me know. If you need to have a phone conversation, just send me your phone number in the email address. I'll be glad to talk to you about this. Like I said, there's no obligations here. I'm not trying to get you to buy anything. I just want to help people. And if I can help you, be a blessing to you by praying for you or anything else that you can think of that might be helpful, please let me know. And I would love to talk to you about that. jason@sparksmore.com. Well, the third part of a foundation for a great marriage is going to be thinking about priority. What kind of priority do you place on your marriage? Is your job getting in the way? Are your friendships getting in the way? Maybe it's pride. How do you balance the things of life so that you make sure you're putting the proper emphasis on your husband or wife, your children? That should be one of the highest priorities that we have. Now, with the exception of your walk with God, marriage is the greatest commitment, it's the greatest challenge, and it's the greatest blessing. The commitment level that we have is so great that we are to lay down our lives for each other, if it comes to it. That we don't abandon each other. In fact, we're so determined to make this right that we have committed to ourselves to live until death with each other. And that means that there are some difficult times that we're going to go through. And it may be difficult times where we almost feel like the enemy to each other. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that we stay committed to the relationship because it's a high priority. Now, it does matter in the sense that we can't continue to live that way. If you feel like your spouse is your enemy, you need to work on it. There's things that you can do, right? There are things that you can do in order to improve your relationship with your spouse. But let's assume that you are in a hateful relationship. What can you do? The first thing you can do is to forgive. And what I mean by forgive is it doesn't matter whether or not they ask for forgiveness. You let it go. You don't hold things to them. Don't keep a list of all the things that they've ever done wrong. Love doesn't behave that way. And when you free yourself from all the ways that this person treats you, that you free yourself from holding on to that anger and holding on to it to make sure that he gets his comeuppance or she gets what she has coming, just give all that up to God. Let him take care of that. And you learn to release those things. Now, I'm not saying that you can't address that. You should address it, yes. But you have to, first of all, let it go emotionally before you can address it so that you can address it properly and you can address it in a way that will ensure the other one will listen. If you come at someone and you're very emotional about the situation, you're very emotional, it could be that you're upset, you're crying, it could be that you're sad, it could be that you're angry. People will react to the emotion first before they actually react to the information. So if you come with them and you're laying out the information and it's not an emotional discussion, it's a rational discussion. You simply lay out the information. They will respond to that because there is no emotion to respond to. In order to get there, you have to learn how to let it go. And that's very important for us because certainly we all need to recognize that, nobody's perfect. We all do things that are wrong. We all do things that are even habitual that really shouldn't be done anymore. And we need help to get through that. The best thing that we can do for our spouse is to be a friend. And it also can be one of the most difficult. Well, there's some other things that you can do if you find yourself in a relationship where it just seems like your spouse is your enemy. It's definitely not a pleasant place to be. But previously, I had a podcast on kindness and how that should help in a relationship. And here are the points that I made very quickly. Hopefully, you can go find that if you want more information. But first of all, we focus on the relationship during the conflict. We show kindness. We're focusing on how important this relationship is. We learn how to listen then as well. We also need to make sure that we're being agreeable. If we're having conflict with someone else, we be as agreeable as possible and show compassion. And those things are going to be very helpful, but also be assertive because we need to make sure that we address what is happening in the relationship. And that means that we need to communicate, and that can be very difficult to do. It's one of the great challenges of marriage is that we have to discuss and learn how to communicate in ways that we both can understand each other. And so if you will put these things into practice, you can at least make some headway if you're feeling like your spouse is your enemy and you want to find a way to fix that. Those are the things to do. don't consider him or her to be an enemy. You consider that person to be on your side, and you go to them and say, let's work this out together. Now, if you, after doing that, it doesn't work, then at least you've tried. But until you actually have taken the time to try to see them in a different light, to try to be agreeable, to try to be assertive and yet compassionate at the same time and show kindness and really listen, you really can't say that you've actually attempted to work on it, or you can't say that you've done everything possible for that. But having said all that, I know that it's very difficult, and I know that it's a challenge. But the commitment must be there. And that's when I say that it's the biggest commitment, it also is the biggest challenge. Getting along together. When you look at a marriage, how many people get married that are complete opposites? There's a lot. I don't know if it's everyone that way. And we tend over the years to become more and more like each other. Yeah, but at first it can be really difficult because the idea of opposites attract. Well, I read a thing the other day that said opposites certainly do attract. They attract failure. There's a lot of truth to that too. That it's almost like we're putting ourselves into an impossible situation where we really don't know each other very well, but we're going to find out all that we can, of course, in the courtship or when we're dating each other. But then when we get married, there are things that we've never realized before. We didn't know about each other, and there are little revelations that you get about your spouse that you didn't know. I think this happens a lot with women more than men, and I'm saying that simply by personal experience of things that I've seen, where the women are a little bit more surprised when they get into the relationship about their husbands. There may be a reason for that. One marriage counselor said, men marry women hoping they'll never change because we adore the woman we're going to marry. We hope that she'll never change. She'll never get any older. She'll always look the way she does now. And she's a bright light in our lives. We don't want to ever see that change. And women tend to marry men hoping that they will change. Oh, this is a man who has great potential. This is a man who one day can be a powerful man. He can be a leader. He can be this or that. And so they're hoping that he will grow into this. Some of that is because of the age that people get married. I kind of doubt that that's as much of a problem now as it was, say, 30 years ago. The age of people when they get married is getting later and later in life. I think it's in the upper 20s now for the average when people get married. And I got married when I was 20 years old. And I'll look at my children when they have, when they hit 20. I looked at Carl and I both looked at each other and said, "How did we get married at that age? We were kids, and it didn't feel like that we were kids, and we really weren't kids. But it looks that way now, and so that is obviously going to have to be a place where we grow. Carl and I, my wife, we talk about the fact that we grew up together. When we were already grown up, we were doing things that were grown-up things, but, there's so much more growth that had to come. And you really do grow up with your spouse. I think it's no matter how young or how old you are when you get married, there are things you have to learn how to do, and you have to learn how to get along with each other, and it's a challenge. With that commitment, we also have the challenge. And thankfully, outside of your relationship with God, marriage is a source of your greatest blessings. Your greatest joys are going to come from your marriage. You're going to have that long-term love and companionship that so many people need. You have that feeling of being complete. God said it's not good that man should be alone. He knew exactly what he was talking about. It's also not good that women should be alone. We are made for each other. We have that mutual care. We have affection. And there are times in life when we really just need somebody to be on our side. We need somebody to pat us on the back. And we need somebody to show us affection and show us love, right? We all need those things. And if we're married, we have that right there. It's not always perfect. And there are challenges, but there's so many joys. You can have so much, there's so much affection that comes in a good marriage. It's worth investing in. It's worth putting some effort in to make sure you have a good marriage. It pays off so much more than you actually put into it. And you also have a lot of joy. It's really hard to have a good marriage and not have joy. In fact, that would be one of the definitions of a good marriage, right? It's something that brings you joy. But I promise you, it doesn't come easily. It comes through pain, but it is absolutely worth it. Peace. That might sound ironic because there's a lot of time in our marriage where we are not at peace. But overall, there's a lot of peace. There's a lot of comfort. There's a lot of, being able to sit quietly with each other. That's a joy to me. That's one of the great blessings of being married. I can be with someone, I can be with my wife, and we can even be watching television, and she's just there. It's a wonderful thing. Now, obviously, that's not everything, but that is a wonderful part of marriage, the peace that we have. Statistically, you also have a longer lifespan if you're married. And I would suggest that the people who have the happiest marriages tend to have the longest lifespans. But it certainly is true that people who are married tend to live longer. They tend to take care of themselves better. They have someone else to live for. Generally speaking, you also have more wealth if you're married. Now that it may take a while to build that up. Sure, you don't start off with wealth, but when you build over time, you tend to have more wealth. There's so many other good things that come from marriage, and I think it's good for us to recognize those things because those are the three things about marriage that are the greatest. We have the greatest commitment, we have the greatest challenge, and we have the greatest blessing. Outside of your walk with God, there's nothing more important. So how long do you think it should take? How much work do you think it should take for you to have a happy marriage? Is it high enough on your priority list? Are you willing to actually put in the work? One of the things that I've seen complaints that sometimes wives will make about their husbands is wives will read all kinds of books and they'll go to seminars about improving their marriages, things like this. And men, we generally tend to not do that kind of stuff. I know I've been guilty of it. And that may have changed in the younger generations. I realize that. People growing up now may have, I'm 48 years old. There are people that are younger than me that probably are better husbands than I am. It could be because they're looking into it more. I see that actually is a trend, but I still think that it's a trend that favors in the woman's side, in the wife's side, that the tendency is that wives spend more time learning about their relationship than husbands. It shouldn't be that way. So we ought to make some commitments right now to our spouses. One of the best things that I've learned to do is to start learning to appreciate your spouse. So if you want some advice, here's a good piece, and I've shared this before. If you'll take a piece of paper and every day write down one thing that you love about your spouse, just commit to a certain amount of time, 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, whatever you want to commit to. Every single day, write something down. Don't worry about if it's the same thing. You write down what you notice. You'll start realizing that you want to notice more and more. You're trying to find more things to write down so you're not doing the same thing every day. And you are then starting to notice what your spouse does. When you start noticing, that's a huge part of communication. That's a huge part of having a happy marriage. These are foundational issues that we're talking about, and we need to recognize the foundational aspect of the three parts of this, to recognize what God has designed, to accept that, to trust God that He actually knows what He's talking about, right? That when He created the roles of the husband and the husband and wife, and set this in motion, however many thousands of years ago that was in the Garden of Eden, whenever He created husband and wife for the first time. We need to recognize that God intended to create marriage, that this is an idea that came from Him. And since it comes from Him, we don't get to define it. We don't get to look at it and say, okay, we're going to choose how we want to live it. No, if we respect God's design for marriage, we need to also respect that we have roles to play. And that's really important because, one of the foundations of living a good life is simply understanding what your role is in life and doing it to the best of your ability. Some people call it their calling. Whatever you call it, it's who we're supposed to be. And when we recognize that we have a role, we also can recognize whether or not we're filling that role, we're fulfilling that. And that can help us have a purposeful life. It gives us purpose and meaning in life. And when that role is actually from God and not something we've actually invented for ourselves, then we have something that is a role that is bigger than us. That's one of the keys to happiness. Find something to do that's bigger than you. And God gives us a whole lot of things. Marriage is one of them. So if you're married, you find yourself married, or you're thinking about becoming married, consider these three things: respect for God's design and authority, authenticity, that's living from the inside out, and priority. You can't have something great without putting some effort in. Well, do you have anything that you would add to that? My name is Jason. You can reach me at jason@sparksmore.com. I'd love to hear from you. You need some advice? You want to talk about marriage and how to improve it? Let's talk. I don't have all the answers, but I'll be glad to sit down and talk with you about it. Go ahead and email me if you need me to, if you need to talk on the phone with me. Just send me your phone number, and I'll be glad to respond. This is no obligation. I don't do anything to try to get you to buy anything. I don't have anything to sell. I'm not even looking for contributions to my ministry fund. That's not my intention at all. I don't have a ministry fund set up. This is all taken care of by the church where I work and attend. I just want to help. What I'm doing on here is trying to help people. So if you'd like some advice, you want to have some discussion, or if you just want to add to what I'm saying, please, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.